What's up and welcome to another episode of GizmoSlipTech. Today we're looking at the best VR headsets of 2019. Now out of all of the VR headsets, I believe there are currently 4 really good candidates that you should consider purchasing that are available for pre-order right now, and that is the Oculus Quest, Oculus Rift S, the Pimax 5K Plus, and the Valve Index. I think these are the 4 top VR headsets. There's lots of different strengths and weaknesses between these different headsets. And another thing I want to note is that I have not actually been hands-on with the Valve Index, but I have read a number of hands-on reviews. So my discussions of the Valve Index will be from a pure specs and all the knowledge that we have about it from the reviewers that have posted reviews of their initial impressions of the headset. So the reason why I decided to include the Valve Index, even though I haven't used it, is because a lot of people are going to need to decide between these 3 headsets and the Valve Index. So I really wanted that headset to be in the mix. Now, some other notable mentions that are not included in this direct comparison would be the Samsung Odyssey Plus. This is a very high resolution inside-out tracking headset that I'm not including in this direct comparison because it has not that great of reviews, and it's really hard for me to recommend it, especially since I tried it and it wasn't very comfortable. It was just immediately like a no for me, so it's hard for me to recommend it. Then there's the HP Reverb, which is a $600 VR headset that has a very high resolution display, but unfortunately, along with the Samsung Odyssey, it also doesn't have very good tracking. So you basically only have 2 cameras on it, and whenever you're outside that field of vision, you lose tracking on the sides and behind you and stuff. It's just really not that great. Another potential contender that I can't really add to the list is the Vive Cosmos, which should launch in 2019 in Q3, so probably like September, October timeframe. That headset has lots of potential as well. It should hook up to a smartphone, so you can like hook it up to a smartphone in your pocket, render games off the smartphone, kind of like a Quest, and then you can also hook it up to a PC. But Vive has not announced any specs regarding that, and you can't pre-order it yet, so that's why it's not in this 4-way comparison. Otherwise, I would have added that in. And then, in my opinion, the Vive and the Vive Pro just aren't worth picking up. Why would you want to invest in a headset that has outdated specs unless you buy like a used one? So that's why I decided to do this 4-way comparison. Let's go ahead and get into it now. All right, so taking a look at the displays, the Index has a 1440 by 1600 LCD display for each eye, and this LCD features sub-pixel improvement, so it should have reduced screen door effects. Now, the display itself has a variable refresh rate. You can do 90 Hz up to 144 Hz, but it's a 120 Hz display by default. This means that the Index should have the smoothest gameplay of all of these headsets. Now, the Rift S has a 2560 by 1440 single display that's split down the middle for 1280 by 1440 per eye. Now, this is also an LCD display with sub-pixel improvement for extra clarity and reduced screen door effect. Now, the downside here is it's only an 80 Hz display, but in my experience, in my about 10 to 12 hours of using the Rift S, the display is excellent, and it's definitely more clear than the Oculus Quest. Now, the Quest does not have the sub-pixel improvement, but it is an OLED display. Now, the Quest has a 1440 by 1600 resolution per eye, so this matches the Valve Index's resolution. The downside for the Quest display is that it's only a 72 Hz display, which didn't really hamper my ability to use the system, except in certain games like Racket Fury, where you're doing really high reaction speeds, and even then, I could still play Racket Fury just fine. It's just not like the best possible experience, but it's still good. It's just not the best possible. Then we have this monster, the Pimax 5K Plus. This one has a 2560 by 1440 resolution per eye, and this uses an LCD display and has a 90 Hz refresh rate. I gotta tell you that this display is fantastic. So as far as screen door effect goes, you look at these screen resolutions and you think, oh my god, the Pimax 5K Plus should have a lot less screen door effect, and that is kind of true, but totally not at the same time, because this has a far larger FOV. It means that the pixels are spread out over a greater distance, meaning that if you're just looking at one spot, The actual screen door effect, I would say, is on par between the Pimax 5K Plus and the Oculus Rift S, with the Oculus Quest being just a little bit behind these two in terms of the screen door effect. So all of that to say that I think the Valve Index and the Pimax 5K Plus probably have the best overall visual clarity on a per pixel basis, and that's because the Valve Index, even though it has a lower resolution, it's going to have the same sub-pixel improvement that the Rift S does, but it's going to have a higher amount of pixels than the Rift S, and that should bring it up to match or slightly beat the 5K Plus's clarity. Speaking of field of view, or FOV, the Valve Index should have about 130 degrees field of view. The Rift S has about 105-ish, and the Oculus Quest has about 100-ish. And then we have the Pimax, and this thing has a monster FOV of 200 degrees, and it is extremely noticeable. You definitely feel like you're looking through tubes a little bit when you're using these headsets. I mean, it's not that distracting, but especially in games where you need peripheral vision, the FOV is really nice with the Pimax. Let's talk comfort. Well, with the Valve Index, it has an IPD adjustment, a lens distance adjustment, and a full ring around the head. I love the full ring around the head, and the main reason is because you put it on your head and the primary weight is distributed throughout the top of your head. This is an example of a full ring, and this full ring means that you're able to game for an extended period of time without any kind of discomfort. Now, the Rift S has a lens adjustment button right here, allows you to bring it closer and further from your face. But because the Rift S has a fixed single display, there is no IPD adjustments. Out of these three headsets, the Rift S is definitely the most comfortable. Now, the Oculus Quest has IPD adjustment slider right here. It also has a glasses spacer, which Carla, my fiance, was able to use her glasses with no problem with the Oculus Quest. So that was really, really cool to see. Now, the downside for both the Pimax and the Quest is that we're dealing with a 3-strap system here on the back. I really prefer to have something more like this guy. Both of these tend to feel a little bit front heavy, like some weight here on your cheeks and maybe your nose, depending on how the headset sits. Now, the Pimax 5K Plus does have IPD adjustment, but there is no lens distance adjustment, and this is partially due to the fact that these lenses are like right up next to your eyes. You're getting maximum field of view, partially because of the size of these lenses. These lenses are enormous, but it's also because of how close they sit to your face. And the downside here is that it's pretty easy for these lenses to smudge against your cheeks or your forehead when you're putting it on and taking it off. So unless you're really careful, you'll need to wipe down the lenses really often. The other thing that I will note is that this foam doesn't fit everyone's face. I wish they had included an alternative foam size, and they do offer it. I don't know, I read in one of the reviews that they offer thicker foam, and I think I would be one of the people that would prefer the thicker foam, just because the very bottom of the Pimax does tend to rest against my nose, and that has resulted in me taking a little piece of foam and kind of putting it right here when I'm actually using the headset so I don't hurt on my nose here. Once I had a little piece of foam in here, I was able to play with the Pimax for hours with minimal discomfort, and the main reason for that is this thing is so light. Let's talk about the controllers for these four headsets. The Valve Index controllers are arguably going to be the best controllers on the market when they are released. They feature a wearable solution, meaning that you can just put your hand through the controller and then you can just let it hover there. Now, whenever you grab something in the game, you just literally grab the controller, and there's like sensors built into the controller to sense your grip and also your grip strength. So there's different levels of grip strength. It also tracks all 5 fingers in your hand, so you can do open hand gestures, do the peace sign, all of that with these controllers. It should add a lot to the immersion inside of VR. Then we have the Rift S and the Oculus Quest controllers. These controllers are exactly the same, and they are very ergonomic and very easy to use. I really liked them. They felt very natural to use, much like the Generation 1 Oculus Touch controllers. And then we get to the Pimax 5K Plus. Now, the Pimax can use any Lighthouse compatible controller. The controllers that I've been using with the Pimax are the ones that come with my original Vive headset. I did buy an original Vive headset to get the base stations and the controllers all in one package, and then I just sold the actual headset. So, because that was like the cheapest solution that I had. Now, I don't love these controllers. They're weirdly shaped. They're not particularly comfortable, and they're actually pretty heavy. So you're doing something like Beat Saber, and these weigh almost twice as much. You're just really gonna feel that weight as you move your arms around. So I have already ordered a set of the Valve Index controllers, which I'll be able to use with the Pimax while I wait for my Valve Index to come in, even though that's on pre-order right now. and it's like so delayed. So you can tell how disappointed I am about that. I really want the Valve Index to come in sooner. When it comes to controllers, I think the Valve Index will be the #1 best controller out there. And then we've got the Oculus Quest and Rift S controllers. These are really good controllers that I can definitely recommend, but they'll not quite be as immersive as the Index controllers. And then of course, you can use those Index controllers with the Pimax, or you can get something cheaper like the Valve controllers. So how does tracking work with each of these headsets? The Index requires 2 external lighthouses, and they cost about $300. I've got lighthouses in my room right here, and this is basically my lighthouse area for VR, right here where I film. I move this table out of the way and I can play here. But it does require some hassle because I have to move the table, and I can only play here. I can't play in the other room if this room's loud or busy, or I don't want to bother someone watching TV or something. This is the only option that I have. The nice thing about the Rift S and the Oculus Quest is that I can take these anywhere because they don't require external sensors. So in terms of flexibility, the Quest is obviously the most flexible. The Rift S is the next most flexible because it doesn't require any external sensors. But the good thing about these lighthouse sensors is that they do improve the accuracy of the tracking by just like a little bit. Like here and there, you're definitely gonna notice like, oh, it's tracking my movements a little bit more precisely, which is useful if you're playing like a really careful shooter like Pavlov VR, where you have to aim down a scope and it's being all shaky on the Rift S. It is kind of hard to aim down a scoped weapon just because the tracking is not like super precise. So let's talk software between these 4 headsets. The Valve Index and the Pimax 5K Plus are both going to be able to use the Steam VR. And the Rift S, because it's hooked up to a computer, can use all of the Oculus Store apps, and then it can also use all of the Steam VR apps, which means that the Rift S probably has the most versatility. Now the downside here is that using an Oculus headset inside of Steam VR is a little bit wonky. I sometimes have to take the headset off to switch games or close out apps. Now the interesting thing about the Oculus Quest is that you can only use Oculus Quest apps from the Oculus Store. Right now there's about 50 games and apps available. Now the big thing to know with the Oculus Quest is that yes, it's got lots of games and apps available for it. It's not nearly as much as on Steam VR or the Oculus Store though. And also when you play those games, it's going to have reduced graphics. The shadows and post-processing effects especially won't look as good. That's not to say that the VR experience in the Oculus Quest is bad. It's actually really, really good, and you definitely want to try it out. If you have doubts about the quality of the Oculus Quest VR experience, I would say don't really worry about it. Just make sure that you buy the Quest from a store that you can return it to if it doesn't meet your expectations. But it is really an impressive VR experience for a standalone headset. And I also gotta mention that the Oculus Quest has a bunch of other functionality that these other 3 headsets actually don't have. And that is a 100% built-in browser right inside the headset. This built-in browser allows easy access to all VR video on the internet. You just pull up a website like youtube.com, open a 360 video, and bam, you're running it. Not that you'd have to do that through YouTube, because it has a dedicated YouTube VR app, which is actually extremely handy for like laying in bed and watching a giant big screen video of a VR video. And then you also have things like the Netflix app, VR chat, Rec Room, a ton of free stuff available right here on the Oculus Quest without having to pay any extra money for those items. Now, of course, you can watch VR video on any of these headsets, but the easiness of it in the Oculus Quest is definitely like 2 thumbs up. Let's talk audio on these headsets. The Valve Index has off-ear speakers. They're supposed to add greatly to the immersion, and they're supposed to be pretty good quality speakers. I'm really curious. I really want to try them. Now, the Rift S has built-in speakers as well. They're really good overall. They do add a lot of immersion, but they lack like the thumping bass of a dedicated headset. So I do recommend getting like high quality earbuds or an over-the-ear set with both the Rift S and the Oculus Quest, just because the audio is going to be that much better. Now, the built-in audio for the Quest is not quite as good as the Rift S. It's close, and it's good enough for your traditional normal VR experiences, but if you want to have a great audio experience, I recommend investing in some nice headphones that you can keep with the Oculus Quest. Now, with the Pimax 5K Plus, there is no built-in audio, but there is a headphone port on the left side, so you can plug in your own headphones, which is what I've been doing. Now, this next next part only applies to the Oculus Quest, and that is battery life. Now, the Oculus Quest can go for about 2 hours of solid VR gaming, or a little over 3 hours just watching VR videos. Now, in my opinion, that is not ideal battery life. I wish it could do like 4 hours of VR gaming and like 6 hours of VR video, maybe in the Quest 2. But for now, I'm content with this level of battery life simply because there's a really long power cable that's included. And so you can basically do full VR experiences just using the power cable. And then of course you can always get a battery bank and put that in your pocket and just have a cable running up to the headset if you want to continuously play for more than 2 to 3 hours. And then you also have the fact that how many of us are actually going to do VR experiences for more than 2 hours straight. And whenever I was doing the Oculus Quest, I would usually go for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, and then I'd come back to it after my break, because you really do need breaks when you play VR. So that's why I guess the 2 hour battery life is not a deal breaker for me. I think it's plenty for most VR experiences. Now let's talk price. So the Valve Index costs $1,000 if you want everything. The Rift S costs $399, and that's for everything. That is such a better deal than the Valve Index. It's a lot more bang for the buck. It's maybe not quite as good a headset in a lot of areas, but as far as getting into a great VR experience for the money, the Rift S is like 2 thumbs up. And then we have the Oculus Quest, which costs $399, and this is the headset I would especially recommend if you don't already have a high-powered gaming PC. And that's the other thing I want to talk about. The Valve Index is definitely going to require a very high-powered PC, especially since it has that 120 Hz to 144 Hz refresh rate. And if you want to actually utilize that refresh rate, you're going to need probably at least a GTX 1080 Ti, if not an RTX 2080 or higher. The same thing is applied to the Pimax 5K Plus. It's only a 90 Hz refresh rate, but it's an even higher resolution display. The Rift S, on the other hand, is literally half the resolution of the Pimax. So you only need a PC that's half as powerful to power this VR headset, which means that if you only have a middle tier gaming PC, the Rift S is going to be a lot better choice. Now the Pimax 5K Plus costs $699 for just the headset, and if you want to get the controllers and lighthouses bundle that they offer, that's an additional $300, so that'll be $1,000 for the entire Pimax cost. Now the Pimax controllers and lighthouse bundle is only available on pre-order, so if you're buying this today, you're going to need to get this headset with something like the Vive controllers and the Vive lighthouses. Now I have been hands-on with the Pimax prototype controllers, and they do seem like a really promising design that seems very similar to the Valve Index's controller setup. I don't know if it'll have the same number of sensors or the same functionality, but it was very comfy, and it is also a wearable controller. So let's talk value. The Quest, I think, is the best bang for the buck display out of all four, because you don't need a gaming PC. You can take it anywhere, and it has everything you need in a $399 package. The Rift S is the second best bang for the buck, and that's because not only is it a $399 package, but it also has the controllers and all the tracking required in that $399 package. The only thing you need is a PC, and you also don't need it to be an ultra high-end PC, so it also makes more sense on that front. The Valve Index, I think, is the number 3 best bang for the buck because it has the headphones built into the headset, and probably the number 1 reason why I put the Pimax 5K Plus at the bottom of the list is because it's going to require the most powerful gaming PC to run out of all 4 of these headsets. The best visual experience of all 4 of these headsets, I believe, is still going to go to the Pimax 5K Plus if you value FOV, and if you value reduced screen door effect, I believe the Valve Index will have slightly better clarity but reduced FOV. So it's kind of a tie, and it kind of depends on what you value in a headset. Next up, of course, is the Rift S. Even though it has a lower resolution, the sub-pixel improvement reduces screen door. The Oculus Quest is last on visual clarity, but it also has an OLED display. So if you're going to watch a lot of VR video, the OLED display is actually going to be better because it's going to have a little bit better colors and better contrast with completely black blacks, while these other 3 headsets are LCD and they're going to have some backlight bleed to them. As far as versatility, it's pretty obvious. The Quest is number 1. The Rift S is number 2 because it can use both the Oculus Store and the Steam VR Store, and it has the inside-out tracking. And the Index and Pimax are just the least versatile of these headsets. Now, as far as the best overall headset, I'm leaning towards the Valve Index, but the Rift S, for the value for the money, and it's just the fact that it's such a solid, comfortable, well-rounded headset, it's hard not to recommend the Rift S. If you value having great FOV, the Pimax is probably the best headset, but it is also very expensive, especially when you factor in the cost of having a high-powered PC. And then you've got the Oculus Quest, which has such great versatility. So if you love having a fully wireless VR experience, if you know that you're going to be traveling a lot and you want to have something that you can take to the hotel, boom, the Oculus Quest is a no-brainer. In my opinion, if you have the maximum budget, it's between the Pimax 5K Plus and the Valve Index if you want the best overall VR experience. The Pimax is in an awkward spot right now because you can't order the controllers and you can't order the base stations without buying them through some other means, and it gets expensive. Which to me means that until the controllers and lighthouses are available for purchase with the headset, it's harder for me to recommend the Pimax to people buying like right now. That's it for my comparison between these 4 headsets. Arguably, I think the best 4 headsets available in 2019. I hope you enjoyed this comparison between these VR headsets. If you did, hit that like button, and if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. I will see you guys in the next one. Brandon out.